tune in. We'll see.
Trevor was waiting for it to be public before he joined.
Yeah.
Did we tweet it?
No.
People might try and learn.
Yeah.
Are you muted?
No. Oh, yeah, I was, but I'm unmuted now.
Hey, Abbotsford, how are we doing?
Good. Why don't you get started?
We're ready to get started?
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
meet here.
Well, introducing Mr. Nathan Shubert-Harbison, front-end developer at Domain 7, who today is going to wow the world in the Domain 7 universe with what is new and exciting in front-end development.
All right. Hi, folks. So I would introduce myself, but I think everyone already knows me. Either way, Nathan in Vancouver. I'm going to talk about some new technologies and trends in front-end development, particularly ones that I've been using personally on projects, and I'm going to go through some examples of them, how to use them, and sort of what they mean for everyone in the team, be it designers, developers, and project managers. And I realize that not everyone writes code every day, or even looks at code every day, or writes code at all. But with the work that we do, all of our products are eventually executed in code. So it concerns all of us to have a little bit of an idea how this stuff works. And yeah, I'm going to try and bring in examples that are specific to everyone. So let's get started here. Oh, I have a beach ball. And very good. All right, so I'm just going to go through a few different technologies. Like I mentioned, I'm going to try and cover a lot of ground. So I'm going to try and fly through this as quick as I can, and if we have time at the end, I'll try and do questions about everything that I talked about at the end. All right, so as I was preparing for this, I was also realizing that originally it was going to be just called What's New and Exciting, and I had to cross out the new part because I realized a lot of these technologies, although new to the web, have been around for quite a while. So I'll mention those as they come up. So technologies that I'm going to be talking about, this is the context that I want to put them in. Any new technology with the web, definitely. But in technology in general, it should start from a place of an existing need. So there should be something with existing technologies where they fall in short, and there is a need there. So I'm going to address that, talk about a solution, how to use this particular thing, and then what it means for all of us, be it design development or project management. All right, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is CSS preprocessing. And these come in a few flavors. There's one called Sass, another called Less, there's another one called Stylus. There are a few of these around. And what I'm going to talk about, I'm using examples from Sass, but the concepts are generic enough that it'll apply to all of them. So to frame this a little bit, before we had CSS, we had the font tag and all sorts of nasty things like that. Actually, I'm going to take out my earphones. It's really weird. I think they can all hear me anyway. Or one sec.
Maybe the one in.
I'll do the one. I'll do the one.
Area.
All right. So so originally, when we were using font tags, you would need a font tag for every piece of text, and in that you would define the font, the size, the color, and everything like that. And it was extremely repetitive. If you had a header on 3 or 4 different pages, you had the exact same thing repeated in several places. So it was really hard to maintain, and it's extremely repetitive. We also have this issue of separation of concerns, which is where you want to separate different code that does different things. So previous we had markup and styles and everything all put in one place, which makes things really hard to maintain. So we wanted to separate that out, which is what CSS was designed to do. And ironically, we'll find out this is also where CSS falls short. Namely, being repetitive. If we have one color that we want to use in multiple places, like right here, we have a link that's a color, and we also want to use that same color for a border for consistency. We have to define that in 2 places. If we want to change it, we have to change it in 2 places. So CSS has already, become repetitive, even though it was designed to not be repetitive. Similarly with fonts. We could, if we want to use the same font in multiple places, we have to create a font stack in multiple places and define it over and over again. One way to get around that is by doing something like this, where you give a class to an element and say, here, our title is going to use this font chunk, and so is our this other element. The problem with this is we have the issue of the separation of concerns, where we still have our style information in our HTML. If we want to change a font, we either have to change the class from chunk to something else, or have chunk actually mean something else entirely. So we don't have a nice separation between markup and styling. CSS is also really tedious and error-prone. If you're doing nesting, like you see here, you end up copying and pasting a selector over and over again. It's really easy to make a mistake here, and it's just not very much fun. With CSS, you can't base a color on another color, which at first doesn't seem like a problem, but you can create a lot of consistency with the ability to base one color upon another. Another problem with CSS is that, as you see here, this is a bit of a mess. It's okay if you don't understand it. All it is supposed to do is create a gradient. It's a super simple thing, just one color turned into another. And because browser support isn't totally even yet, we need vendor prefixes, and it looks like this. It's really hard to read, impossible to maintain. So we don't like that. So CSS preprocessors are going to help out a lot with these things. First of all, the issue with defining colors in multiple places. We can create a variable, and that's going to be the name of our color. And we can create a variable that's the name of our font. That way, say we use this font chunk for all of our headers, and then 2 years later, chunk is looking kind of long in the tooth. I guess it might actually be in that state right now. You could just change the brand font variable to a different font name rather, and that'll change on your entire site. So this extends what CSS was designed to do, namely to have a clear separation and to be non-repetitive. So here we're using that variable instead of the color name, and we're using it in different ways. We're using it as a text, and we're using it as a border. So if we want to change what our brand color is, it'll take effect in multiple places. So this is really powerful. And that compiles to this. So we got where we started. We have the same thing that we wanted, but we got there a lot quicker. It was a lot easier. And in the future, should they rebrand or something, it would be a lot easier to change all these colors just in one spot. We couldn't base colors on other colors with regular CSS, but we're able to do that now with preprocessors. I'm not sure if you can all see this, but around this brand color here, we're darkening it by 20%. And what that allows us to do is maintain consistency in styling and a lot of flexibility too. So if we have colors based on other colors, we change them in one spot, we change the one variable, and the whole site changes and all the colors based on that change. Actually, just while I'm on this, I'll quickly point out, you'll notice that I'm naming my variable not what the color looks like, but what it is. And fonts are not, the variables are never named what they look like, it's what it is. So if I were to say, like, the variable name is red, and it holds a hex code for a red color. If they wanted to change all that to green, I'm going to have a variable named red, but it means green. That's really confusing. Same thing with fonts. So we always want to describe what it is, not what it looks like.
Good question. Just around designing around colors to change by tint.
Yeah.
How does a designer need to speak into that potential?
Yeah, so I'm going to try and fly through everything.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go for it.
But really quickly, Jeremy was wondering about design considerations for colors based on other colors. It's really easy in Photoshop. You can vary a color based on brightness alone or saturation alone, and these are things that we can alter in pre-processing. So if we use that, that's really good. Now, the other issue you mentioned was nesting, where we have some sort of nasty situation like this. It's hard to maintain. Preprocessors let us just nest a selector inside of another selector. So instead of having one ID in multiple places, we have one thing in one place, and it's a lot easier to maintain. A little tidbit for the developers. I find that the deeper you go with nesting, it can get easy to lose track of what brace you're closing. Sorry for everyone that's not a developer. But I find that this little comment here really helps to maintain your bearings when you're nested deeply. And that compiles to this. So you still get this. This is what the browser needs, but we didn't have to write it in that tedious way. This whole big nasty thing, they're just supposed to give us a gradient. Now we can just include a piece of code that gives us a gradient. It's a background linear gradient, and it's going from white to this hex color. And it's going to turn into that, but we don't have to write that. This little piece here with the background gradient, it's a reusable piece of code, so we can write things that are reusable, use in multiple places. And another time where you might want to do that is with a button, for example. So if you were to have a class of button on a button and say button white on a button, I've seen this some places. It's really bad because you have an issue of separation of concerns again, and you don't have a distinction between markup and style. If you want your button to be red, you're going to have to change your HTML from saying, class button white to button red, and you might as well be using inline styles or font tags. So this lets you maintain a really nice separation. It's a quick overview of what they can do, how to use them. It's a compiled language, so that was the before and after. You write the before, the SAS, or whatever the preprocessor is, the compiler will turn it into the after. You can use it in the command line. Those that want to do that probably already know how to. I'm looking at you, Andrew. There are also apps available. CodeKit and Compass app are two of the most common ones. I've used them both. They're both really easy to use. If you're using Less, there's a Less app that you can use as well. Having a preprocessor isn't a new idea. This has existed in the C world before CSS existed, where you can write in one sort of super language or enhanced language and have it compiled. But this is the first time this has existed in the world of front-end development. So it's actually really exciting. And actually, I'll quickly point out that I mentioned that preprocessors fix issues that exist in CSS. CSS itself, those that are writing specs for CSS, acknowledge that these are issues. And they're working to make them part of full CSS. So, and then they will get there, but it'll take a little bit of time. So what does this mean for you? For the biz dev folks, if a client ever wants a variation on a theme, say seasonally or something like that, it's Christmas, they want their website red and green. If we're using variables for colors and basing other colors on those, we can achieve that really fast. Like, it's totally doable if the site's built that way. Or if they go through a rebranding, or if they can't decide what they want their colors to be. These things can be treated really gracefully with preprocessors. For designers, since these things allow us to design or write our CSS more modularly, which is more maintainable, you can also think about designing more modularly. So instead of just designing the page top to bottom, think about designing reusable building blocks that form the DNA of your design. And you end up with a more efficient, more cohesive design, and you also end up with more efficient, more cohesive code. So it works out really well. And also think about derivative color schemes, like I mentioned, where you can have, say, a couple base colors, and then if you need to base another color on top of that. And developers, have some fun with this. Yeah. So that's what CSS preprocessing is all about. I've been using it for probably about a year and a half. Yeah, I absolutely love them. It's a lot of fun. Next thing I'm talking about is Modernizer. So what's the problem that Modernizer eventually is going to address? There are a lot of new features on the web these days, like CSS3, HTML5, mobile devices. They all can do a lot of new things, but browser support isn't totally available for all of them. Internet Explorer 7, for example, doesn't support really anything, but a lot of people still use those browsers, and we need to support them. One way that people have done that is by looking at the user agent string. So when you go to a website, your browser will actually tell the website what you're viewing it with, or the device you're viewing it with. And you can use that to assume certain capabilities, but it's unreliable. So we want to get away from that. People have also used screen size detection to assume touch. So say if you're on a small screen, you're probably on a phone, and you probably have touch support. That's not reliable at all, because you can get a tablet that's bigger than a laptop screen. Actually, I've got a 13-inch MacBook Pro right now here, and if I go to Future Shop, I can buy a tablet that has a larger screen than this. So screen size and touch isn't going to be one and the same. So we need a way to know what the device can handle and what it can't, and provide solutions for that. So Modernizer steps in to help with that. It's a JavaScript library for feature detection. So it's not device detection. It's detecting whether it can handle a very specific feature. It'll test for CSS3, HTML5, and device-specific things. It'll allow us to do progressive enhancement and graceful degradation. So progressive enhancement is when you start with the baseline and add upon that if the browser can do fancy things. Graceful degradation is when you start with more of like a fancy site and kind of fall back in a guided free fall kind of way. Modernizer allows you to do both by testing if your browser can do something and go either direction. It also has the HTML5 shim, for those that know what that is. I'm not going to get too much into it. So how to use it. Modernizer will add classes to the HTML element. It provides a JavaScript object, and it has a library called yep-nope. Yep, as in that feature exists. Nope, it doesn't. Sorry?
What was that? Yeah.
Yep-nope. So you can use it to test for features. So I'm going to fly through this one pretty quick because it's going to be probably the least entertaining for non-developers, but really useful for developers. Anyways, the HTML classes look like this. It's a class on the HTML element that just says whether or not the browser supports a certain feature. So this is RGBA. It lets us do something if the browser has it or not. So here we're saying if there's no RGBA, instead of using, say, a semi-transparent background, we're going to have an actual image for that. So we want to get away from images as much as possible, but here, probably Internet Explorer 7, we have to use an image, so we'll just do it when we absolutely have to. And for those that are of the SAS inclined, this is how you would do it that way. You could nest it, and note the ampersand there. We'll bring that selector outside of nesting. The Modernizer object lets you test for things with JavaScript. So say you want to do a bunch of JavaScript stuff just if your device can support geolocation or touch. You would do it like this. You can also test media queries and do certain things just if a media query passes. And the last thing we can do with Modernizer is the modernizer.load. Used to be called yep-nope. Now it's called modernizer.load. So first you test for something. So we're testing for geolocation. That's the top line. If we have it, we're going to do some geolocation stuff. If we don't, we're going to do something different. So it allows us to be really controlled about what features we're doing and like how we implement them. You can do a little bit fancier stuff as well. You can include some JavaScript for both, and you can run a function when it's done doing that. So this also isn't a new idea. This has existed in other languages forever. Not forever, since very specific version numbers. It's existed for a while. This is PHP. So if the do awesome things function exists, we're going to do some awesome things. Otherwise, we hate Mondays. So this is the new, it's similar to preprocessing. This has existed in other languages and technologies, but first time it's existed in front-end development. So for BizDev folks, if people are concerned that their website won't work if we do crazy fancy new things, we can assure them that we have ways of testing whether or not their device can actually do those things and provide fallbacks. Ease client concerns, rebranding, brand identity crisis. That would be from the previous thing, and it's still there. I copied and pasted. We'll skip that. My slide is not changing up on the Hangout here. Oh, there we go. So for design, just keep it on. And developers, you know what to do. So that's what Modernizer is about. No worries. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is icon fonts. This is the feel-good number of the set. This is yeah, exactly. So why would we want icon fonts? What sort of problem exists that an icon font could solve? We have a proliferation of pixel densities in devices. So think Retina screen. You can't see me, but I'm making air quotes around the word Retina. So the Retina screen, for example, Apple has a few different screens, a few different pixel densities that it calls Retina screens. And in the Android world, they have all sorts of them as well. And like, we really have no idea what densities they are when we're building a website. And we have no way of testing it at the moment. They're working on things, but at the moment we don't. So that's kind of frustrating. Responsive sites sometimes need different sized images. So regular images sometimes don't really work. And when you're working with icons, you could often need icons of different colors. So this is a set of problems that icon fonts do help with. Since they're a font, they're scalable. You can set your font size. It becomes any size you want. They're stylable, totally a word, I'm sure. As in you can put a shadow on it. And they're animatable, also a word. And that you could, spin them or whatever with CSS. Bonus round, you can localize them. So since they're text, you can change the text based on where someone is. So same symbol may not mean the same thing in all places. So you could localize your symbols if you wanted to. And they're also really performant. They load really quickly. So this is what an icon font in action is going to look like. This is the mobile site for credit unions of BC. And when I was building this theme, I was concerned about dealing with various pixel density screens. Like I wanted it to look good on iPads and iPhones and Android devices and all sorts of things with different pixel densities. And I didn't want to just have like massive images. So I went the icon font route. And this will scale to any size screen and it'll look great. What you're looking at here, if you see the star icon on the left and the star icon on the right, it's the same icon, the exact same character. The background color has changed, and I've done that just with CSS. I could change the foreground color, I could change the border, the shadow, all of that stuff just with CSS. So it works really well. This is how you could use it. So you would use the character and give it the font. For example, in this case, a Z, it could be, I don't know, it could be a zombie or something. So, okay, this is DevTown. I'm going to cover this really quick, but I generally use these in pseudo elements, so that way they're going to be ignored by screen readers. And this is how I would do this in SAS. Okay, so you can come run into issues with Internet Explorer 7 with pseudo elements, but you can use Modernizer to test for that. Using icon fonts is an old idea. Think Wingdings. So Wingdings is a font where every character is a symbol. And we've had this for a really long time. What we're looking at here is David Carson's. He said an article that he thought wasn't worth reading in Wingdings because so bad. Why would you want to read it? You might as well set it in Wingdings. But and he did this, I guess, in the 80s. Someone could correct me on that. But this is the exact same technique where you take text, set it as a font, and then you can even see here he's used colors and sizes and stuff. He's using icon fonts in the 80s, ahead of his time. So for BizDev folks, if a client asks you about a Retina display, they'll probably say Retina display too, even though they're not called that on Android phones or whatnot, but they're totally going to use that term. If they ask, we can handle, we have ways of handling that. Icon fonts, scalable images will help with that. So we can use that. For designers, if you're working on a design that has a lot of icons in it, think about using an icon font set, maybe going through the glyphs that are available. See if they might fit with your design really well. If there's not, you can actually create your own. If you create your icons in Illustrator, they can be turned into icon fonts. And developers, yeah. So that's the deal with icon fonts. The last thing I want to talk about is content folding. This is a fun one. So here's the problem. This is a traditional website layout. On the left, you have the main column. The right, you have the sidebar. A traditional responsive website, the sidebar goes at the bottom. The main content goes on the top. The problem is you could have important things in the sidebar that once it gets shot off to the bottom has lost all meaning. You could have a secondary nav there. You could have ads. The advertisers are going to get really mad. The madvertisers. Yeah, that's a thing. Jordan prepared that one, I'm sure. So you could put the sidebar on the top, but maybe there's too much stuff in the sidebar to make that worthwhile. So this is a difficult problem to solve. This is what we want. We want to be able to take things from the sidebar or other parts of the page and integrate them with our content to keep everything contextual and relevant. This is content folding in action. Hey, this is a really well-written blog post on content strategy. Kevin's hanging out in the sidebar there. So if we were to put the sidebar on the bottom of the content, like a traditional responsive layout would do, we would lose a lot of context. You would read the whole article before knowing who wrote the article, which is actually really important to know that this is written by Kevin Gilbert. If you were a fan, you'd want to know that. Yeah. All right. So instead of just shooting the sidebar to the bottom, we took part of the sidebar and moved it into the content. So now you're reading a bit, you read a little bit of Kevin, you read a little bit more, you're happy. You go to the site on a really small screen, and as soon as the slide changes, this happens. Kevin gets a little bit higher up. Yeah, so that's what we want, and this is how we do it. First, we test what size the screen is. If it's a large screen, we'll do something. If it's a small screen, we'll do something else. All right, so you can do it with Modernizer. You can test for media queries, run a function that'll do all this, and it'll be a lot of fun. Here's another example of that. I'm skipping this because I made the slide and then found a way better way to do this, which is this. Thanks to Doug Avery for pointing this one out to me. This is a JavaScript library called Harvey from Harvest. Essentially, you give it a media query, so the exact same media query as your CSS. So you're writing CSS, you have something that happens at a certain point, copy that media query, paste it here, and then and then you can do some content folding here as well. If you need to do something on setup, you can do it there. On-off, I found is pretty much, sometimes I've used setup, mostly just on-off. So the on function, that's when you enter the media query, and off is when you leave it. You run a function, the fold, breakpoint, midsize. So that's going to take some content and move it around the page. And then the off function is going to put it back. So that's how you do that. She mentioned that in maybe 2-ish years, it'll take a little bit of time. You're going to be able to do this with just CSS. It's called a CSS region, where you can tell CSS just with the media query to move things around. It's going to be really fun. In the meantime, we have to use things like Harvey because CSS regions aren't quite there yet. So for BizDev folks, I've heard this concern a lot with mobile sites, that if you, the traditional shove the sidebar to the bottom, you don't get a tailored mobile experience. And content folding lets you tailor it a little bit more and to just make that experience better. You still don't get the dedicated app-like phone, interface, but you can get closer to that. Designers, you can start thinking about this stuff when you're doing your responsive mockups. You start moving things around a bit. This relies on JavaScript, and it relies on moving things around the page. So we don't want to do a lot of this. So don't have a completely different layout, but maybe move a few things around that you think are really important to move around. And developers, yeah. So that's what content folding is about. That's actually all 4 of the topics I wanted to talk about. So I think I'll open up for some questions if anyone has any. Any questions?
I've definitely done.
Yeah, Jeremy, here's
I've got
questions.
several. A couple will be punchy. One, can you tell me?
Wait, hold on. You want to stand right behind Nathan?
Yeah.
So that we can get the audio in here.
Really close.
From somebody who doesn't live in this world anymore, just curious if you can tell me, what does a CSS preprocessor, what does that output?
So for the deceased, someone who's no longer, sorry, what? So what a CSS preprocessor outputs CSS.
Okay.
You write your preprocessor language, it processes it and turns it into CSS.
Okay, second quick question, content folding. Can business development assume content folding means increased time for development?
Yes.
And design too.
And design, yeah.
I also think, my question is
Oh, sorry, I'm not sure if everyone heard that. Jeremy was asking if content folding would mean it would be extra time involved. The answer is yes, because you need to write a function for when you enter and when you leave the breakpoint and move around your stuff, accordingly. So it takes a little bit of time. Totally worth it.
And my last question, and probably the most important thing of all,
Save the best
all
for last.
4 of these topics seem completely relevant, completely awesome, stuff that we should all be doing. Can we, as a large team, implement this out and make sure that everyone's going on this? As far as design and developers, I would love to see that everyone gets up to date on this technology.
Yeah.
It sounds fantastic.
So Jeremy's wondering, is everyone on board with this sort of thing? I'm not sure if everyone heard the question. I think we should assume that everyone is on board with most of it, if not all of it. Ourselves, at our own work, if any of these things seem foreign, we should all kind of look into them and play around with them. None of these things are really time-consuming to learn. We put in a little bit of time, the payoff to time put in for all of these things is just massive. So, yeah, James, there's a question here. Oh.
I think a similar question to. Anyways, a similar question I think to what Jeremy was getting at with the last question there.
do we really need to be doing this at, like, all sites must use, or all solutions must use these technologies, or we're setting support up for a bunch of headaches?
Yeah.
I guess particularly on the preprocessor, does support need to know when they go to make a, say, eventually a small change on a site, that you have to actually go to a different place, grab precompiled code, make the change there, and compile it, as opposed to just making the change?
Right. So
what does that mean for support?
Yeah. So what does this mean for support when we're introducing all these things? The CMS team is using preprocessors on all of our new sites. I know Custom Dev has been using it a little bit because it's baked into Rails. It cuts support time down a lot because once your code is done this way, it's a lot more maintainable. There's a little bit of upfront time, just make sure everyone knows how to use it. But once you're there, upkeep is way faster. Yeah.
Is there a way to know whether just, a ticket comes in, it's urgent, Joel needs to work on it,
Yeah.
everyone needs to work on it. Do they know this is a site that has used these technologies versus not?
Right, yeah, so how to know the site has used the technologies, like I'm using a preprocessor. You will actually find a folder called SAS and another folder called CSS. So when you're looking for the files to actually edit, you will find preprocessor files, basically. And then they'll confront you, and it'll force you to choose one folder or the other. In a non-preprocessed style sheet, you'll just see a CSS folder. But here you'll actually see both. So you'll know right away. So you can get in there really quick. In terms of other things, other projects, like should all projects use content folding or icon fonts, things like that. Content folding takes a little bit longer, so if there's budget for it, by all means. Icon fonts, I think yes, if there's a case where we can use them. I mean, you're going to use an icon anyway. Might as well be an icon font. It's going to be way better. Modernizer, I think every site should be built with Modernizer, unless you're going to be rolling your own solution to test for things and provide fallbacks. But it's just so easy to use, and it increases the quality of your websites just dramatically. Yeah, I think all websites should include Modernizer. Yeah.
Hey, Nathan.
Yep.
Hey, Nathan, when using icon fonts, who would be responsible for actually creating the font file, and how does it get posted and used on the web? Like, in what format?
So was that Tim?
Yeah, that's Tim Booker.
Hey, Tim Booker. So who's responsible for creating the icon font? There are a few ways you can go about that. There are a few existing icon fonts out there. I know Ryan James has a few really good ones that he's mentioned. There are a bunch of them that already exist. You can use them, see if they're appropriate. If they are, then just go ahead, use them, send them to the developer. They can implement them on the site. If they don't exist, you can create them. There are a few different ways to do that. If the designer knows how to create one, then by all means do it. I'm not sure if all the developers know how to use them, but there are a bunch of tools out there that are available. But on sites that I've done with them, I've made them myself if I needed to. There's an app called Ico Moon that's really good. It's a web app. Doug Avery's Hieroglyphs. Oh, Doug Avery says don't use hieroglyphs, use Ico Moon. So there's that. Use Ico Moon. On the topic, also the Noun project is a good source for these things. You can find vector glyphs, and you can make fonts out of them.
This is Stephen. Just have a question about license attribution. When we're using fonts like that, a lot of those fonts actually come with like Creative Commons share-alike licenses. And how do we account for that in our code? Are we documenting what we're using and making sure we're attributing sources?
Right. So there's a little.
Oops, we lost the audio. Hello.
I totally muted myself. Slick.
There you go.
So like, using icon fonts. It's similar to using regular typefaces. You need to either find something that's open source or find something where there's a license that you've paid. If they require some sort of credit, then yeah, you have to follow that. But it's the same as using like an open source icon set or a typeface.
Right. And another question, just we're using SAS in one of our front-end development projects for Claremont McKenna College. And one thing we had to figure out right at the beginning was we were using a different sort of syntax or coding style from one developer to another, and we just had to decide, let's use two spaces, or let's leave out the comments because they're redundant and repetitive, or it would be good to come up with some conventions just as a team that we can all follow, so that all the developers know, and then when it comes to passing that off to support, we're all following the same conventions.
Totally. So Stephen was asking about standardization and working with different developers using different coding styles and having some sort of standard there. How do we deal with that? So I say with SAS, it's the same as with any language. That if there are standards in place for a particular framework, by all means follow them. On a team-by-team basis, sometimes teams develop certain standards, and yep, definitely having that kind of thing in place with SAS or with anything is worthwhile. In terms of commenting, my take on commenting is the more the better. You're never going to be confused because there was too much documentation unless it was just really verbose and not helpful. But I think always err on the side of extra documentation. Yeah, I think it's something that can be developed like on a team-by-team basis. But does that answer your question, Sue?
Yeah. It would just be good maybe just to document that somewhere for us as a team. Let's just, if we're going to do that, let's do it. Another question would be for SAS, and maybe this is something I can bring up just on a one-to-one thing, but I was running into something where I was trying to use variables inside of mixins, and SAS was working. So is there a way around that, or is there something I need to learn?
Sorry, I was. So you said you had some variables. What was the issue exactly?
I had a variable that I was putting inside a mixin, and apparently SAS didn't like trying to compile.
Right. So it's all about the order in which you include your files. So sorry, Stephen was wondering about like order of dependency, basically, how you can use one piece of SAS and another piece of SAS. I try and break up my SAS projects into little bits that I can organize in order of dependency. So I'll define all my variables before I'll define like reusable bits. So I can use, say, a color or a font in a reusable chunk of code. So that might help your issue, Stephen, is if you make sure that your variables are just included previous. I tend to have one file that is just loading other files. So it'll load like, underscore variables.scss before like underscore mixins.scss. And that'll help that issue, I think.
Okay, thanks.
Nathan, would you be able to propose some standards for organizing SAS files and the contents of the files themselves so that we can maybe get on the same page? Because I can see an issue if CMS and custom dev and whoever else are sort of organizing these things differently. That's going to be 2 to 3 different ways that support needs to learn how to dig through these files. If we can just pick one way and do it, it's going to be really helpful.
Totally, yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. So Andrew was talking about having a standard way across teams of organizing preprocessor files. Yeah, I would love to propose something. If you think maybe we want to get custom dev and CMS teams chat about it beforehand, we could do that. Or I could just, mock something up and use that to get started.
I totally use your photos. Let's do this.
Blank.
Yeah, I'd encourage you just to put something together because it'll be a good starting point for a conversation.
Yeah, rather than just seed it with a base idea and then evolve it.
Plus we can give it
Sure.
Yeah,
It'll,
great to have that.
Totally, yeah. I'll do that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So who's that kid in the picture? Or
That was awesome.
I guess if no one has any other questions, we'll adjourn and get back to work. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, David.